Now, let us get straight into this very heavy and important discussion. And I would like to start my first question by addressing Reem. I'm very grateful that you're able to join us despite the violence around you. And I really hope that you are and your loved ones are safe. But I imagine your life has been turned upside down, to put it in some words. Can you tell us a little bit more about the reality of what it has been like for you since the Israeli military started their offensive on Lebanon a couple of weeks ago? And please feel free to share as little or as much as you feel comfortable. And I still would like to ask the audience not to share the details of your personal life beyond the summit.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Rania, for your question. And also, I would like to thank Gerla for giving me the space to come here. And before I tackle this question, I want to kind of give a trigger warning. I know many of my friends from Lebanon are joining to watch me. I know also we could have Palestinians, Arabs, and also people coming from other regions of the world that have paid the price for the militarization and violence. What I will be talking about might be triggering for some of you, but that also speaks to the dehumanization and censorship of Arab voices, the fact that we go through many traumatizing events and still we feel the obligation to come up here and talk about it because this is the only way for people to see us for the human beings we are. The second remark I would like to give is I know that many of us aim to be politically correct sometimes. This is not my aim. I aim to be politically accurate. What's happening in Lebanon currently and the genocide in Gaza did not start on October 7th, did not start on September 23rd. It comes in a broader context that started in 1948. It also comes in the context that the south of Lebanon was under Israeli occupation for 20 years. So what we are facing here is very much an existential threat. It also comes at the expense of our territorial integrity and our sovereignty. On September 23rd, I woke up to the sound of Israeli surveillance drones. This is the sound that you might hear coming from many videos out of Gaza, but also out of Lebanon. I thought it would be another day of psychological warfare. Indeed, I was on my Instagram and I saw a post that was sponsored by the Israeli spokesperson. On my way to university, we received a notification that the Israeli army would carry out large offensive across all Lebanon. By the time I reached university, we received the first image of Israeli army and forces carpet bombing the south of Lebanon and Bekaa. I see my own college friends having to leave classes to call their families in the south of Lebanon, them telling them that they just hit next to them. People had to wait 7 hours on the road trying to evacuate while the army were bombing also the evacuation roads. I found myself in a very delicate situation. Many of Lebanon's public schools were transformed into shelters. So normally, like many of my friends, we decided to volunteer. My own school came to host about 3,000 displaced families from the south of Lebanon and from Bekaa. On my way out of my volunteering shift, I was sending a voice note to my outreach coordinator to tell her about the needs of women in those shelters before the Israeli army decided to attack Beirut for 3 minutes nonstop bombardment. And with every bomb, it felt that it's coming closer to us. Later during that night, many of the Beirut's neighborhoods, especially the suburbs, started receiving evacuation orders. I remember telling my friends in those neighborhoods to come and spend the night at my house because, I thought that my neighborhood was safe. I live 3 minutes away from the regional UN headquarters. I live 5 minutes away from the Lebanese parliament. And still, 2 days later, the Israeli army decided to bombard a medical facility 1 minute away from me. This is my same neighborhood that was filled with displaced families. I am now very lucky to have been having the privilege to evacuate to an area that is deemed safer. But I want you all to remember that Lebanon is such a small country. We all live 10 minutes away from a city or a village that is being bombed constantly. Just yesterday, the Israeli army issued evacuation orders to a village that is 10 minutes away from me. Just now, within the split of 20 minutes that we had to wait to join the panel, the Israeli army carried about 6 sonic booms over the area that I live in. This is the reminder that even if you live in a safe area, nowhere is safe under occupation. I want you all to remember that we are not human shields nor collateral damage. I work closely with a feminist organization, Female. They do amazing work. Their centers in the south of Lebanon were actually targeted. Their center in the Bekaa was also targeted and severely damaged. Those are centers that have survived the economic crisis in Lebanon, the political crisis, the backlash against feminist movements in Lebanon, and yet failed to survive the Israeli aggression over Lebanon. We lost many feminists, and I would just remember Julia Ramadan. Julia was at her place in a building full of displaced people, just coming back from a shift to secure food for other displaced families before the whole building was leveled down. Also, I would recall Fatima Murad. She's just a 14 years old beneficiary of a sports program for female. She was martyred along with many members of her family in Bika. This is just to give you a sense that many of you would have seen Lebanon for the first time on TV channels. You don't even know how to place the country on a map. But we are more than numbers. The 2,500 Lebanese that were killed in this brutal Israeli aggression had hopes, had loved ones. They meant the world to others. They are not just numbers. Today, Lebanon is at the brink of another humanitarian crisis. Today, we have more than 1.2 million displaced across the country. And to keep in mind that Lebanon is just a population of 5 million. Syrian refugees had to go back to Syria. So imagine leaving the country because of a conflict and returning because of a conflict. I will leave the floor to others because I know I consumed maybe a lot of time, but my message is just to think beyond the headlines that you are seeing on the news.
Thank you, Reem. And thank you for this powerful intervention. I think a lot of individuals attending this summit are feeling the same feeling that we're all experiencing and have been feeling for the past year and that our families has been experiencing for the past decades. And thank you for sharing your experience of what it's like to live under all of this violence in real time. Also very speechless. I don't know if I should say proud of how strong you are because you don't always have to be strong. And I'm very sorry that you have to endure so much and that you and other young girls and children and women and men in Lebanon and across the region have to endure so much. I know that Maha, with your expertise, you have worked with UNICEF for several couples of years around the region, and you got to see firsthand many of the challenges that girls, whether they're refugees, whether they're displaced, or whether they're just girls and women in the region, and has been affected by conflicts, by militarization, by occupation and crisis, just as Reem described. Can you speak to us a little bit about some of the tactics that you're using to address the needs and ensure the protections of young girls and women in the region, especially during challenging times?
Thank you so much, Rania, and thank you, Reem, for sharing with us the authenticity of being there and being under such dire situation. We're all with you. All hearts are with you. Uh, Rania, I mean, it's almost ironic as we prepare for the 30 years review for the Beijing Declaration and the plan of action. We're still striving to hold on to human rights, women's rights, child rights, principles and gains that have been made. I mean, as you heard from Reem, girls from Gaza, the West Bank, Sudan, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, we're faced today with conflict and crisis in our region and around the world, but especially in our region at a scale like never before. And girls like Reem and you inspire me. Look, it's no wonder then that when UNICEF carried out a study last year, we found that 1 in 6 young people in the region are living with mental health stress. And girls are experiencing a higher burden of poor mental health due to higher rates of depression, anxiety. But around the world and around our region, there are real development crises as well that girls and young women face daily. in our region, youth, female youth, 15 to 24 years of age are twice as likely to be not in employment, education, and training than male counterparts. Unemployment rate of young women in the region is projected to be double that of young men, nearly 3 times as high as the global average. Almost 50 million girls and women have undergone female genital mutilation in 5 countries in the region, with a prevalence rate as low as 7% Iraq, but 94% in Djibouti. And about 17% of girls in the Arab region are marrying before the age of 18, which equals 40 million girls. And girls with disability are higher risk of early and child marriage. And it only gets worse. All of this only gets worse with conflict and crisis. I really feel that there is hope. I mean, Reem talked about female, there are other organizations that are coming together, and girls themselves have told us that there are solutions. In March, we came together at the CSW. We came up with 5 transformative solutions. Healthcare. Many of you may know about the HPV, or you may not know about human papillomavirus vaccinations that are available. Nutrition, addressing anemia, addressing overweight, underweight, ensuring that you have education and life skills and learning to make that transition to employment, and then safety from and freedom from violence, including sexual, psychological, economic violence, and economic support. In humanitarian crisis, we have humanitarian cash transfers. And as Reem said, female and other groups in Lebanon and Oxfam and partners and the Gaza Strip are putting together girls' networks and connecting them to social protection and plus programs for health and nutrition. The challenge is huge, but unless we do that kind of multi-sectoral programming at scale, we can't hope for the kind of transformative investment for girls with girls. And in a crisis and a conflict, we've got to invest even more.
Thank you. Thank you, Maha, for sharing your insights and some of the ways and tactics that are being used to address the needs of girls and make sure that they're protected. John, I know that you have a lot of experience in advocacy and organizing, especially in conflict areas and in militarized zones. Is there anything you would like to add to this conversation?
Thank you, Rania and Maha and Reem for your powerful words. I don't want to take up too much time here, but as somebody who's spent a career kind of building movements and putting together coalitions, I just want to highlight the power of Reem's experience and words. I think that one thing that, the world that does not experience conflict and threat on a daily basis forgets that when a country experiences conflict and when people are under threat, that life still has to go on somehow in the midst of that. And it's hard to even conceive of it for parts of the world that don't understand that people still have to go to school. You still have to call your friends. You were on Instagram. You were making a voice memo. Those details of what your daily life is like, Reem, in this present moment carry power and weight and give color and understanding to people outside of the situation who maybe don't have personal experience and can relate to it that way. But hearing those kinds of personalized details from you, it puts a face to it. It puts a name to it. It makes it very relevant for everyone in the world, particularly knowing that even countries that may consider themselves safe or immune from conflict are not. And we all have to be advocates. We all have to be building movements and leadership opportunities for everyone in our societies to push back against these threats that women and girls in particular face on a daily basis in today's world.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for sharing more insights. I would like to jump back to Reem, and I was just wondering, for those who feel disconnected, as you mentioned, from the violence that you and Maha have described in Gaza and Ukraine, Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, to just name a few, what do you want them to know? What do you want people who feel like in the safe area they're located and that they're so disconnected from the violence that you're experiencing? What would you tell them and what you want to emphasize?
So also I would build on John's comment. The fact that some people believe that, okay, they're living in a safe country, I think it's important for them to think at what expense came their safety. So with what's happening currently in Gaza and what's happening currently in Lebanon, we know for a fact that who are the politicians that are enabling this genocide and this Israeli aggression, the tax money of which citizens are kind of funding everything that we're witnessing. I received a lot of messages from many of my international friends asking me how I am doing. And for a split of a second, I got mad at this question because I wanted to ask them, did you take also the moment to email your representatives, ask them for an arms embargo, ask them for a ceasefire? Did you also join a global protest in solidarity with the Palestinian and Lebanese people? But for them, it was taking the easy way and asking me how I am doing, and even worse, asking me if I'm able to evacuate. And this is also another thing that I want everyone to know, that this sense of, evacuating your home is a privilege. And also no one should be forced to leave their homes. I would also bring back the conversation that Reem from Gaza mentioned. She lives now in a refugee camp. It's her country. She deserves to live in a full dignity. So what I really want to answer your question, I feel that everyone is connected to what's happening in the country, even if currently your country is not witnessing a bombardment, it is still in some way connected. Still, the items that you are buying at the supermarket are kind of enabling what's happening in our country's corporations that are funding the Israeli aggression and the genocide. So I think we all have a say. We all have a say because it's your tax money that is going into that, because it's your representatives who are enabling that, because it's your money, again, consumerism. So I think we are all connected to what's happening. And I would love for many people to, kind of start taking actions. And also by consuming the media, this is very important, because I really literally had to beg a lot of my international friends to post about Lebanon, to keep talking about Lebanon. Many of them, they were asking me what to post. And I'm like, just go on the internet. Maybe you won't see people like me on CNN and BBC every day, but at least do the effort to share an Instagram post about what's happening and, as we say, walk the talk. So yeah.
Thank you, Reem, for your insights. You mentioned boycotting and being aware of the products that you're consuming. I know you, John, have a background in grassroots organizing and youth activism, going back to your work with leading student organizations. Can you tell us more, some of your experiences working to affect change, besides, in addition to boycotting? How did you get your voice heard within your representative, within decision makers?
Yeah, thank you, Rania. I think the situation that I worked on that most closely aligns there is working several years ago on the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where women and girls were being targeted by gender and sexual-based violence at absolutely alarming rates, and horrific stories were making their ways into international headlines. But the international community and the U.S. government that I was trying to influence through movement and coalition building felt very disconnected from Central Africa. And so finding a way to highlight that interconnectedness that you talk about, Reem, is critical, I think, to changing the situations on the ground. In the case of Eastern Congo, through research and a lot of other methods and partner organizations, we ran an international campaign targeting tech companies that were benefiting from the mining that was taking place in Eastern Congo. And those minerals were eventually making their way into all Apple products, Samsung products, all of the cell phones, TVs, and gadgets that we use to power today's modern world were originally found in Eastern Congo and funding and fueling violence on the ground there. So holding companies accountable for not just what price they sell products for or what they're doing in terms of their public relations campaign or speaking out or what their foundation might be funding, but looking at the true root of their supply chain and how it is funding and fueling conflict around the globe. So there are multiple examples and opportunities, I think, on working on Darfur, Sudan 20 years ago. I was honored to be a part of the college and high school student movement internationally and globally that sprung up in response to that conflict, which also disproportionately targeted women and girls. And we created a network and leadership opportunities for young people. And now, 20 years later, I can say that the students that were involved in being leaders in those early days, even when they were teenagers or 21, 22-year-olds, they're now working in various places around the globe, some of them connected to NGOs in the United Nations working in conflict areas, but some of them are vice presidents at Instagram. Some of them have run for office. And so creating those leadership opportunities through these moments of crisis and conflict that, yes, we want to stop them right now, but it's also providing a template for all of us who are involved to gain leadership opportunities, which then we can convert into future crises and kind of teach ourselves how to turn our passions into action and activism and make that change happen.
Thank you, John. And I would just like to direct my question to Maha and also ask about some of the challenges on the ground, especially in the region, and realizing a coordinated, collaborative approach to advocacy. How can we make sure that our advocacy efforts are more effective, especially related to the issue that we heard the most about, such as violence against women and girls, and conflict, and access to quality education?
Yeah. I'm so glad that Reem highlighted the fact that there are resources out there, right? Keep ourselves informed. Yesterday, I tuned into Khatira, on social media. Every day, I watch Democracy Now, and I look for alternative sources from mainstream media. It's really important to stay informed. What we found is really impactful, and I'd like to highlight some of the existential crises that we face in terms of climate changes, building intergenerational coalitions. Working with Karama last year and 14 women's and girls organizations, we established Wahed Network. Wahed means promise in Arabic. And with the Wahed Network, we were able to be part of the COP28 in Dubai and have a say, have girls' voices amplified in regional and global positions. Also, when we talk about a just transition with climate change, when we saw what happened in Morocco, we saw what happened in Libya, it's making sure that the girls' movements that are there on the ground are given resources, are given space to help inform programming. So we've done training now with the clusters that UNICEF leads, nutrition, WASH, education, to make sure that the people that are on the ground are the ones that are informing the kinds of programming that we do. And finally, we as UNICEF have developed a global girls leadership and advocacy group so that we can stay informed, an advisory group to UNICEF ourselves so that we stay current, we stay relevant, we stay active, and support the movement building that girls have on the ground.
Thank you. Thank you, Maha. Maha has offered some very practical ways and strategies for young girls to engage, like the advisory board and other networks that has been created to shift the outcome of these global crises. And I wanted to ask you, Reem, from your own position right now, what concrete actions do you want your peers and others to take to create change and to lead and to divest and to actually create a change that is going to be meaningfully impacting you?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rana. This is like a very important question. First of all, I would like to remind people that I know maybe speaking up could like present a threat for your future career, job opportunities. I've received messages from some of my friends who are based, for example, in the US, but on visas, telling me that they cannot speak up because they fear, their immigration status. I think that if you have the privilege to speak up, please do, because while you are fearing for your future careers, we are fearing over losing our loved ones. So we are truly relying on you because people's lives actually depend on it and depend on your action. Again, what I want people to do is very concrete. First of all, I know that many of you are tempted to donate, and this is very important, but it's also equally important to challenge the roots of the causes. What led us to this crisis that we are witnessing today? And it starts from political organization. There are also, building on John's comment, we've seen student movements also connected to what's happening in the Middle East today. If you are able to join that in a very peaceful way, please do, because that's also supporting many of the students who are risking their academic success. I would also say, call your representatives, call them, at least make them see that what's happening today is not a status quo and it's not the general consensus among like American citizens. I'm also not only speaking about Americans, European citizens. The EU is the second arm provider for Israel. I'm also speaking for other countries in the Asia Pacific. We all have a say. Push for international investigations into the war crimes that are happening in Gaza and in Lebanon. And also, I would say, challenge the narrative. Maybe today on the face you could put through what's happening in Lebanon. And that also brings me to say that we are not human shields, we are not collateral damage. I think, for example, you all have seen that every single airstrike that happens in Lebanon, we always tend to justify it. Okay, maybe there was like a terrorist base, but then there's no evidence of that. They tell us that, oh, we bombed you, but we gave you evacuation orders. Those evacuations are posted on Twitter and X at 3 a.m. in the morning. For the past 3 weeks, I cannot sleep if all my family are sleeping, because what if we receive an evacuation order? Evacuation orders that are also inaccurate because they highlight in red a random building that they end up bombing another building. So again, to make my answer as concise as possible, use the tools that you have for political organization, donate to really trustworthy organizations. I see here UNHCR, but also grassroots feminist organizations. Maha talked about Khatira. Don't consume BBC or CNN, like, okay, you can do that, but also like try to, there are many Arab, Palestinian, Lebanese voices who are highlighting what's happening. At least see us for the human beings that we are. You have a lot to do. I know that with everything that's happening currently in the world, it's very overwhelming, but think of us living through that and having to come up here and to tell you to please act. So I would just say, please act and use your privileges, because people's lives actually depend on it here.
Thank you, Reem, for humanizing Lebanese voices and for using the stage to share concrete ways people can help you, at least try to help you and try to bring the light. There's one question from the audience that I would like to direct to John, speaking just from your experience organizing as a student. There's a question about how can teenagers make a difference and be part of the global community to fight injustice in the world? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that builds on what Reem was just saying a little bit about taking the time to take individual actions, posting on your social media, calling your representative, making some purchasing decisions, and speaking out on these conflicts as an individual is extremely important. But equally important is to build a movement, build a community that shares those concerns, that can amplify those actions and make them 10 times more powerful. So I think that individual action matters, but a lot of times people get so focused on their individual actions that they forget to reserve some of that time to recruit others into their network. And that's something that teenagers and young people are particularly good at. It's a skill and a social construct that globally that we can all benefit from. Teenagers that are inspiring and building movement and community to make individual actions more powerful and more collective. And when you recruit a group of friends and family and from your wider network, then you have the opportunity to create leadership positions and expand that power exponentially so that the leaders and those in power are forced to respond and address the issues that are driving social movements within their countries. And so just a note that, yes, think small, think individually, but also think collectively and how you can bring others into that orbit to expand the power of your own individual actions.
Thank you, John, for highlighting the power of us, the power of collective actions, the power of bringing young people, elderly, to collaborate and to foster change. And thank you to our panelists for joining us for this discussion and for having a conversation about how we can move forward.